We are live. And it's the
Oh.
Pirate Broadcast. Thank you, Sarah. Woohoo, we made it. We made
Yay.
it. It's a Friday. It's a Friday. And I just want to welcome you. If you come into the room and you're watching it after the fact, just hit replay and make some comments. Let us know where you're coming from. If you have any questions that we can answer or anything like that, a few housekeeping rules. You can leave comments. However, we can't see them in LinkedIn. If you want to leave comments, you can head over to YouTube or you can head over to Facebook, and I can see your comments. LinkedIn's working on it, I know. So, however, we have an amazing program that we're going to be talking about. Another amazing program later on in March, and we have as a special guest today, Sarah Elkins from Montana.
Good morning.
Are you in Montana today, Sarah?
I am. And right in the middle in Helena, which is the capital of the state.
I've been to Helena many times. I've spent time
Really?
in Helena. Yes, absolutely. I was a musician for years, and in the mid 80s, I used to travel around the northwest of Canada and play college towns. Every week would be in a different town, and we spent a lot of time in Helena and Havre and Great Falls and Butte and Billings. And
wow.
all of those places. I love Montana. Montana's a beautiful state, and spent a lot of time in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, and Oregon and Washington. So that whole northwest scene. So.
Wow. Not many people can say that they've spent that much time in Montana or Idaho.
Yeah, it was a great experience. One time, we had a 33-foot Bluebird bus we would tour in, and there were 6 of us, and we had a light man and a sound man and 4 in the band, and we went out. We drove this bus out camping. We went camping, and we woke up the next morning and there was a foot of snow on the ground.
That's not unusual.
That's not unusual.
Even in June.
Yeah, exactly. So Sarah, you are a storyteller at heart, and I just have just this connection with storytelling and how people interact and involve themselves in this mind, this kind of mindset of storytelling. And so how did you arrive at Helena, Montana, and storytelling and creating events in Atlanta, Denver, and now Chicago? Tell us, walk us through the basic story, and then we'll dive in deeper.
Sure. Well, the basic story is that I was actually born in Washington, D.C., and my family moved around quite a bit when I was young, and we settled in Colorado. And Colorado Springs is where I ended up finishing high school.
Okay.
And went to college in Fort Collins, and then had a paid internship in Washington, D.C. And as an adult, well, I don't know if you could ever really call me an adult, but as an adult,
Are we truly adults now?
Moved to Washington, D.C. Gosh, I hope not. I never want to be a grown up.
I'm not growing up.
But so after my internship, I ended up staying. I loved the energy there. I loved being a young single adult there, and played like crazy for the first couple of years, and then met my husband, and didn't have any intention of ever getting married or having kids. Like that was definitely not on my list of interesting things to do in my life. And met my husband, and everything, of course, shifted. And 8 months after we met, I asked him to marry me, and he said yes.
You proposed, yeah.
I proposed. And this was almost, it was 25 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So we
get things done.
Yes. Well, that's I don't know if you're familiar with the StrengthsFinder, but that assessment came up without any surprises for me a couple of years ago. And one of my top strengths is strategic and activator. So once I get something in my head, I kind of immediately have a plan and just go forward with it, which kind of helped when it came to this wild hair of doing a workshop or a conference, not in Montana.
Yeah. Let's not start in Montana. Let's leave Montana to go have an event.
Yeah. So, well, part of what happened was it's really hard to get here, and it's really expensive to get here.
Yeah.
And I've spent a little bit of time in the hospitality industry as a director of sales at a hotel, and knew that February and early March are the cheapest times to do an event because they're desperate. The hospitality industry is super slow that time of year, so restaurants and hotels will give you a crazy good deal.
Mm.
And the first thing I ever have done in all of the years that I've been planning events and participating in the planning of events is think about how my guests are going to get there. That's the key.
Transportation. Yeah.
Transportation. How are they going to get there? What is the least likely difficulty that they can experience to get there? Um, Whatever I can do to make it simpler for people to get to where I need them to be, I'll do. So the first year I did some research on different cities across the country where their statistics were good for February in arrival and departure times. And Chicago immediately dropped off the list. But
Yes.
I've always wanted to do this in Chicago. I love Chicago. It's a great city, so much to do. There's so much centrally located. You can walk almost anywhere if you have an event right downtown.
Yes.
But I was really depending on rates to be low for people to be able to make it. And that first year, Atlanta was definitely, it was just the obvious choice for us. And what was interesting was that I got the best deal. It was $149 a night at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Atlanta for my guests, which is absurd. It's
Yes.
absurd.
That's
Um,
insane.
there was a Lexus dealership conference that same week that they shifted from a different hotel at the last minute, and their rack rate went up to $325 a night and sold out a few days before our conference. So thank goodness none of us really, told anyone else who was staying there how much we were paying, because it
Oh,
would have been a problem.
there would have been a riot going on.
Seriously, $149 a night, and it was literally one corner away from a metro stop, the MARTA, so
Yeah.
people could get on the train from the airport and be at the hotel in 20 minutes
Not
for
have to worry about
$8,
it.
something like that. Nobody had to rent a car. Nobody had to park their car, which of course is outrageous prices to park cars around big cities, and everything was walking distance. So that's why we selected Atlanta that first year.
That's the beauty of it. I love walking cities.
Mhm.
I spent a number of years in Seattle, living downtown. Used to bike to work and all this kind of good stuff, and then I moved to Houston, and Houston is a completely opposite city of that. It's amazing how different the dynamics are in different cities. So
Mhm.
hey, I just want to give a
Yeah.
shout out to everyone that's joining us today. Sherry Lolly, Julie, Jeff. Good morning. Jeff says hi. How's the Big Sky
Good
Country?
morning. It's gorgeous.
And
Well, I don't
Lewis.
know. It's awfully dark outside right now.
Yeah, it's probably still dark. Vicky O'Neill, Lewis, Jeff Young is here. Arcot. Uh, Kenyatta, good morning. Thank you so much for
Good
being here.
morning.
One of the things that I love about this idea that you have is storytelling and bringing live people. It's almost like the next level for a LinkedIn local, and much more. How would I say the it's it goes much deeper.
It
So
does. Well,
what was the source of your inspiration for doing it this way, and just deciding, hey, I want to do this. I'm going to do this because you're that type of person.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
and then because I know Zach and Shelly are speaking at this event as like
Mhm.
two of my two amazing people that I just enjoy tremendously. And I've actually hired Zach a couple of times for doing the work.
Mhm.
And so I noticed a lot of people that I've connected with, and this
Mhm.
whole thing is, and I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn, and I just kind of wanted to see what your source inspiration was for this.
Sure, of course. Well, I was thrilled to see LinkedIn Local pop up, and I've actually hosted a few. I hosted one in Berkeley, California when I was there visiting a year ago, almost 2 years ago. LinkedIn Local came long after NLV, no longer virtual. The first one was in 2017. So
Okay.
the idea actually hit in August of 2016. Yeah, it was July or August of 2016. I had been connected to this handful of amazing people, and we had just been sharing each other's content, and I had gotten so much out of it. And I don't know if any of our listeners have lived in a small city, especially in Montana or in the Northwest, but it can be really isolating. And
Yeah.
10 or 12 years ago, it was even more isolated.
Yeah.
So as soon as I started connecting with these people all over the world, I felt like my world had opened up. And coming from DC to Montana was such a culture shock. And
That is a huge culture shock.
it is. And
You
we
didn't
moved.
tell us the arc of that story, but
Right. I got disconnected there with the why Atlanta, but we moved here to raise kids because
yeah.
I had planned to go right back to work. I didn't even plan to have children. So when my impulsiveness hit and we got pregnant, luckily we got pregnant pretty quickly. We didn't have to try very long. And I went right back to work and then realized that it seemed silly to have somebody else raise my baby. I had
Yeah.
a great nanny,
Uh-huh.
but I was crying on my way to work every morning. And that just seemed so unlike me, so out of character for me. And one day I got home and I said, we need to live somewhere where we can spend more time with the baby. And literally within a week of that conversation, my husband was offered a job here in Helena, Montana. And remember, this is at the cusp. This is 99. This is at the
Holy
cusp of
cow.
the internet explosion.
Yeah.
And we decided that it would be a good experiment to see if we could live in Montana and still be connected globally like we were in DC
Right.
because of the internet. It was such a big deal.
Yeah.
And honestly, we got here, not that it's changed that much in the 20 years we've been here, but there were two T1 lines across the entire state.
Oh,
So it was not only slow, it was expensive. And
yes.
it took me a long time to finally reconnect with my world of professionals. And, but I did. And I connected with folks like Chris Spurvey, Neil Hughes, Karthik Rajan. These were the LinkedIn voices of 2015, 2016. And I felt so close with them just from interacting online.
Yeah.
And Karthik Rajan, for one person, I learned so much from so quickly. And we had never talked on the phone. And Chris Spurvey as well, he wrote the book, um, It's Time to Sell, which really changed the way that I viewed what sales were. The word sales as a salesperson, always made me cringe. But for some reason, his book changed things for me.
Yeah.
So I got on the phone with Karthik one day, and I remember just getting this huge grin on my face when I saw his number come up on my phone and feeling like a little kid, like there was a celebrity calling me, which is so silly. But it made me realize how LinkedIn had evened the playing field.
Yeah.
These people that I thought of as, out of my league in terms of brilliance and career success were calling me and asking me questions.
Yeah.
And we had this amazing conversation, and this was on a Friday afternoon in the summer, and I walked home from work, which you can do in some places in Montana, and my commute was like 8 blocks or something like
Yeah.
that. And I
Terrible
walked,
commute.
yeah,
Terrible commute.
terrible commute, in the beauty of Montana. And I walked home, um, and I started talking to my husband about this amazing conversation I had. And I could not stop grinning for the whole weekend, talking
Oh,
about, oh, Karthik said this. And then we talked about, and he said this, and the story he told me. And my husband's like, okay, wow, you met this guy how?
yeah.
And I reminded him that I'd been connected with Karthik for a year online.
Uh-huh.
And I remember waking up that Sunday morning totally on fire because, first of all, I had been really concerned about the disconnect people had been having, really relying on their online relationships for their human connections
Yeah.
and forgetting that we're built for face to face. As humans, we see so much face to face that we subconsciously observe that our brains can't possibly process it all when we're face to face,
Yeah.
like micro expressions. Um, and I saw so much depression rising, which is really interesting that I saw this so long ago. But I saw this depression rising, and I immediately attributed it to people not leveraging this amazing tool of connection of LinkedIn
Yeah.
by meeting face to face and deepening that.
Well, I think people, I mean, lose. I mean, there's two sides of it, and realistically, because the face to face, being online and building a connection like we're doing right now, is an amazing opportunity, because what happens is you have this element of getting to know an individual, from a soft introduction piece of the equation, where we can have conversation, we kind of understand where we're at, what we're doing, what's happening in our lives, and you can really cultivate that emotion, that feeling. And then when you get face to face, it's almost like you're two steps ahead of anyone else, because you've already kind of gone through the system or the process of getting to know each other.
Exactly. You're leveraging this amazing tool. And that's what I was seeing was missing with LinkedIn and everything else. I saw the direction it was going in terms of people not realizing why they were depressed. I'm so connected. I have all these friends, but I'm so sad and isolated, and that conflict. And they didn't necessarily put it together, realizing that it's because we are designed for using all of our senses when we connect authentically with another human. And the thing that I realized that Sunday morning was I had learned so much from these people. So much. Like it had changed the way I saw myself, the way I saw my role in the world. It built my confidence. And I thought, if I did this all just from interacting online, just imagine what could happen if I met these people face to face.
Yeah.
I mean, just imagine the energy that we would share and grow by meeting. I mean, this is perfect time of year. It's Hanukkah. And I think about the lighting of the candles, the Hanukkah candles, and the fact that when you take the leader candle, you'll see 9 candles on the menorah, and one is used to light all the others.
Right.
And when I gave a Hanukkah presentation to kids, I give in Montana, there aren't a lot of Jewish families. So I gave presentations every year my kids were in school to tell the other kids what Hanukkah was about and expose them to it in some small, minor way. And I would always remind them that when you had that leader candle and you would light the other candles, that it didn't take away any of the brightness of that original candle. And in fact, when you put that candle next to another one to light that other flame, it made the flame for a moment grow much bigger.
Yeah.
And that's what NLV was all about, was getting
Growing
these
together.
individual candles and putting them together in one place. My light just turned off. Let me turn that on.
It's still dark here.
Sorry. Yeah, it's really dark. It's really dark here. And when I thought about meeting people face to face, I imagined that light just growing exponentially, and it did. And as Karthik actually said, later on, we did a podcast about it, and he said, it felt more like a reunion than a business conference.
Yes. Because
in a good way, without the obligation.
Well, I think a lot of people fail to understand the power of this connectivity that is developing around the world because of platforms like LinkedIn. And LinkedIn for me is, like a source of inspiration every day. I do these programs because I really truly believe that everyone has a gift, and people are doing interesting things that we seldom see or have an opportunity to understand. And if I can highlight something from someone else, just like the candle, if I can light your candle and we can shine a little bit of brightness on what you're doing, then more people will understand what you're doing, and it just kind of it just has this upward spiral kind of effect.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
it's a kindness that people fail to understand sometimes. And it's like, get to know people. Everybody's everybody's approachable for the most part, and we all have busy lives, we all have things going on. However, if you can connect with individuals and then meet them in person, it's incredibly powerful. And I just applaud you for doing this, and thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about it today.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really fantastic. So talk a little bit about Chicago specifically and what's coming up, and
Sure.
what your goals, and if
Mm-hmm.
wild imagination flies free, what would you like to see take place at that event?
Well, if it can be even um, a little bit of what it has been for the past 3 years, it'll be fantastic. I can't take the credit for what it's become. I always limit it to 50 people because I think that's about as many as can be in a room and really truly connect with each other.
Mhm.
And also, I try to make it as affordable as I can because the diversity in the room is really, really important to me. And I want it to be exclusive because there are only 50 spots, not because it's so expensive that only people with money can be there.
Right,
So I've kept it at 550 is the registration for a full 2-day event, which is pretty unheard of in our industry.
right.
And the facilitators all volunteer to be there.
Oh, that's
I
fantastic.
I don't pay them to be. I would My ultimate goal, hopefully starting in year 5, which will be in 2021, is to be able to pay at least their expenses, if not just give them a stipend toward their expenses, because um, they bring exactly what makes NLV NLV.
Yeah.
And this year, the theme is really about, it's always about connecting because it's no longer virtual, it's always about connecting. But the theme this year is really to highlight what real engagement looks like
Hmm.
because so many people have fallen into the whole like category where it's almost like they're watching from a distance because they're concerned about stepping in and commenting, what is this going to look like, how are people going to respond to
I
this.
can't have an opinion because someone might judge me on it.
Exactly. And so they hit the like button to let you know that they were paying attention, but there's no conversation. And the beauty that I found in LinkedIn years ago in 2016, 2015, when I first started getting in there, was that the gold was in the comments. As much as at the time, I wasn't producing a lot of my original content, but I was sharing other people's work that I found interesting.
Mm.
And then there would be this whole conversation in the discussion in the comments, and I really miss that. What I see more and more is the comments aren't necessarily contextual. They're not. They're not deepening the conversation. Most of the time, the comments are tagging other people, which is great, but
It's
they
like
don't
surfing.
add.
It's like
Yes,
surfing. I'm just skimming
throw me on
across
the
the top of
swim.
the water here.
Exactly. Exactly. So this year's theme really is about deepening that engagement, taking the time to do it. And I know that some people do that because they just don't have time to dive deeper. But
Yeah.
I would say that it's better to spend 15 minutes in 2 deep dives than to spend 15 minutes skimming the surface.
Yeah.
And so that's really the theme in 2020. It's March 12th and 13th in Chicago. We're doing it at the venue, the Mid America Club, and I have a room block at the Fairmont. So we're right near the big park and the Art Institute of Chicago, which is one of my favorite places to visit in the world.
Yes.
And one of the sessions is actually a field trip to the Art Institute.
Oh,
So at the end, the last session of the first day is Chris Spurvian and Megan Miller are going to host a session on the power of observation in sales and connection. And we're actually doing kind of a scavenger hunt event or session at the Art Institute in small groups. And then we'll go back to the hotel and debrief. And that to me is the key to this event, and limiting it to 50 people is that you can do something like that, and it's
Yeah,
totally reasonable to do a field trip with 50 people. But if you
that's
have
magical.
500, there's no way you could do that.
Well, Kenyatta Turner says, delightful discussion, Russ and Sarah. LinkedIn is magical. So
Mhm.
we're both fans of the LinkedIn magic and really
Mhm.
building and developing deeper connections on LinkedIn. So
Mhm. And I would love to see some of our listeners at No Longer Virtual Face to Face. There are 20 spots left, and
okay,
I would really love to hit capacity in 2020 because I know that it will just make the magic stronger. The facilitators are phenomenal. And again, I just want to stress that this is a reasonably priced event because we want a diverse group there. We want diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of job and professional interests. It's really an amazing group of people that comes together and cares about each other. So I'd love
well,
more.
I've actually met Zach, and we met in Vegas for a different event, and I've had Sarah on the show, or not Sarah,
Shelley.
Shelley on the show.
Mhm.
And so their presentation alone would be, I mean, phenomenal because I just know their backgrounds and what they stand for.
Mhm.
And some of the other people that I'm connected with in the agenda, in the curriculum, is I know that this will be an amazing event. So I just really, I can't, I can't stress enough how amazing. And I know I'm saying amazing way too much, but it's
It's like exclamation marks, right?
yes, exactly, exactly. That's how excited I am, and I'm definitely going to do what I can to get there in 2020 because I think that this would be a phenomenal opportunity to connect in real life and go deeper and understand people and where they are and where they're going and what they need. And we can all contribute to this cause. I mean, we can all contribute to the it's like if you help others around you, somehow you just get lifted up. High tide raises all boats mentality. And it's just amazing that you've done this and you've created this and thank you and I applaud you for your efforts and energy in
Thank
this. Thank you
you.
so much. Sarah.
Thank you, Russ.
So in addition to this, is there something that you would like to share? I mean, you're a storyteller. You do storytelling on a regular basis.
Mhm.
How is the storytelling evolving in your world?
It's pretty fascinating that it's suddenly a buzzword
Yeah.
just in the last few years because I've been preaching about storytelling for years. What's interesting is the dynamics around it, that it's shifting because it's a buzzword. It's kind of shifting to anyone can tell you they're a storyteller. Anyone can tell you that they're a storytelling coach. And I would encourage people to really watch other people tell stories,
Mhm.
watch how their audiences respond to those stories before you dive into getting any advice from somebody who says that they do that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I won't go to a hairstylist that has crappy hair. Like, if you have a bad haircut, I'm not going to ask you to come and cut my hair. And
Me
the thing,
neither.
it's one of those things that I think people misunderstand. Storytelling for business is very different from storytelling for an individual,
Yeah.
but they're deeply connected in that you can't separate yourself from your business anymore. You just can't. Your reputation is your whole self. It's not just what you put out on LinkedIn. And when we can uncover our personal stories that connect us to other people,
Mhm.
it's not just about sharing our story, because the magic is when you can share the right story with the right audience at the right time that actually helps trigger their memories and helps them share their story with you.
Yeah.
That's where the magic is. It's not about presenting a story. It's about engaging with the person and helping them draw out their own stories.
Well, I think the best stories, are the ones that trigger that emotional connection. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I feel that. I feel that. And it's really I mean, it's a craft. It's something that you really have to understand and dive deep into. It's like a musician, it's an instrument, and the psychology of the words you use and how you use them, the phrasing and everything about it is just when you hear a great story being told, I just
You're
love
just
the whole.
drawn in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're drawn
absolutely.
in. And I mean, literally the best stories that I've heard in my life are probably when I was growing up and going camping with my uncles and,
Mhm,
listen to them tell stories about when they were kids growing up and some of the shenanigans that they used to get into and,
mhm.
some of the problems they had and,
Yeah,
how they got out of it. And those kind of stories are heartfelt and they're
mhm,
deep in meaning. And I think there's a lot of need for storytelling in our
mhm.
life today because there's a disconnect and a little bit of depression that goes on
A
and I
lot.
think that there's way too much actually it's not a
Mhm.
good trend. So
Well, that's what my podcast is about. My podcast is called Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will.
mhm.
And I just signed a contract with a publisher a couple weeks ago, so my book will be out sometime in the late spring by the same name.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I would love to remind whoever's watching, listening to this, that your stories don't have to be epic. They just have to be meaningful.
Yeah,
So if you feel like you don't have any stories because you don't have a celebrity sighting or a near death experience that you can talk about, that doesn't mean you don't have stories. And I love to share a story about when our first son was born and we lived in Washington, D.C. And every time I tell that story, people cry. And it wasn't an epic story. Nobody almost died. There wasn't an accident or some ridiculous, weird adventure. It was that I was looking down at this beautiful 8-week-old baby and realizing how deeply my life had changed.
yeah,
And I remember I was on the phone with my mother and I just started weeping, sobbing, which is very out of character for me. My mom was panicking over the phone. She was in California. I was in Washington, D.C. And she's a baby nurse. And so she was convinced that something had happened to the baby or it was postpartum depression. Or it was, it goes from zero to catastrophe, as my friend Shelley Brown says,
yeah,
in a millisecond.
yeah,
And I remember this moment of looking down at this baby with these huge brown eyes and eyelashes, that you could get stuck in.
yeah,
And I'm just sobbing and I can't get my breath back. And I'm, that you can't even breathe because you're sobbing so hard, so deeply. And my mom finally said, "Sarah, please tell me what's wrong." And I looked down at this baby and I said, "Mom, it's just that now I know how much you love me."
mhm,
And when I tell that story, I feel it all over again. My
yeah,
mother and I cried together for a few more minutes and then got ourselves together because I finally got the words out. And when I tell that story, I remind people it's not what happens, it's how you talk about what happens. It's how you process it externally later on that actually builds that memory and becomes part of that neural pathway that makes you who you are.
yeah. That that's beautiful. And I, I I love that people share those events, those opportunities with us. And Sarah, this has been a gift. I love what you're doing. I appreciate it and applaud you for your efforts and energy in this. And like I said, I know what Helen's like, and it's living in a beautiful country, and
It is.
it's an amazing world we live in. And I just want to thank you for jumping in this Friday and talking about your event, your activities, and I will definitely go enjoy your podcast and catch up on some other things that you've got going on. And I look forward to 2020 and all the amazing things that are going to take place here in 2020.
Thanks so much for hosting me, Russ. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And always, if you're in the community and you have questions, drop me a line. I'm pretty much anywhere you can find social media, and I'd love to have the opportunity. Sarah, this will be up on Russ Johns later on today, and you can share it out and help Sarah promote the events, everyone. So it's an amazing opportunity. So let's get in. Let's promote this event because it's important and it's useful and it's necessary in our world today. So Sarah, all the
Thank
best
you.
in the world. Kindness is cool. Smiles are free. And you enjoy the day.